Oh, we got to get to this last caller. It's 7:46. Oh man, I only got like 10 minutes to get to this. Okay. I wanted to get to this because, again, I talk about this quite a bit on the air, but the amount of wealth inequality that we've seen emerge in the preceding decades, the previous decades. A new study from the RAND organization has aimed to quantify how much money the majority of workers, the bottom 90% by income, would have made if earnings growth had not begun to disproportionately flow to those with the highest income starting in the 1970s. So just based on how, as our last caller started talking about how those jobs used to be in the car plants and stuff like that, if you hadn't seen those types of jobs leave this area and this country and be sent overseas, we started making cars in Mexico and Canada with NAFTA, and we started making a lot of stuff in other foreign countries. If according to Mr. Carter Price, who authored the study, if we just had the same income distribution among workers as we did in 1975 and take into account continued economic growth, the majority of American workers would have made $3.9 trillion in 2023. 3.9 trillion. That's $4 trillion that workers would have made collectively if we hadn't started down this road of deregulation and shipping jobs overseas and a race to the bottom where generally American working class people were frozen out of the type of good paying jobs. Cumulatively, the gap between what workers from 1975 to 2023 earned and what they would have earned with the counterfactual income distribution tallies at $79 trillion. Good God. Yes. That deserves that.
Money, money, money.
Yes. $79 trillion is what workers from 1975 to 2023 would have earned if we had just kept the level of income distribution that we had from the 1970s. And so Bernie Sanders has responded to this study. He said the massive income and wealth inequality in America today is not only morally unjust, it is profoundly damaging to our democracy, wrote Sanders on his social media account on Tuesday. In response to the study, now the analysis updates earlier numbers on the same topic. A previous analysis from Price and his co-author found that the gap between what the majority of workers earn and what they could have earned if more uniform growth rates from the 50s and 60s had contributed a total of a number of $47 trillion in 2018. So if wages had kept pace with pre-1975 levels, just where we were at in 1975, the average full-time worker in the bottom 90% would have earned an additional $32,000 last year. Just think about that. If wages had kept pace with what they were in the 1970s, the American worker, the average American worker from the bottom 90% would have earned another $32,000. So this is what I always talk about when you guys start talking. I hear a lot of you guys who started working in the 60s and 70s saying like, oh, well, I did this when I was young and I worked for this and these young people don't want to work for this. Dude, you were working for the equivalent. You were working for the equivalent of $25 an hour in the late 60s. Because that's exactly what the minimum wage would be if the minimum wage had kept pace with productivity and inflation, which is what the minimum wage was started out to be. It was supposed to keep pace with inflation and productivity. American workers have never been more productive, which is another thing they don't tell you, the corporate-owned media don't tell you. Between 1975 and 2018, the top 1% saw their real incomes grow by 321%, nearly 3 times the overall economic growth rate. Meanwhile, wages for the bottom 90% of workers have remained stagnant. Real wages reached their peak in this country in 1973. 1973 is when real wages reached their peak in this country for your average working class person. Obviously, Ronald Reagan was the catalyst for this. One of the most significant shifts came in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan, who slashed the top marginal income tax rate from 70% to 28%. 70% to 28%. That's incredible. And y'all let him do it? Because I wasn't born yet. This dramatically reduced the tax burden on the wealthiest Americans while corporate tax rates were lowered, leading to a rapid accumulation of wealth at the top. Further tax cuts under George W. Bush and Donald Trump continued to benefit the wealthiest Americans, exacerbating inequality. The 2017 Trump tax cuts alone delivered an estimated $1.1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%. That's the 2017 $1 trillion tax cuts. Now, might I add, for all you Democrats out there, because I know most of y'all listening vote for the Democrat, the most unpopular Donald Trump has ever been was the day that those tax cuts went through. That was the most unpopular he had ever been. And instead of seizing on that and allowing somebody like Bernie Sanders or AOC or just some populist left-wing candidate or left-wing populist Democrat to come out and say, this is economic warfare, this is what we're going to do, we're going to be the party of the working class and fight back against the billionaires. No, that's not what happened. Joe Biden ran on, everything's going to be the same. You know, Kamala Harris didn't run on the class war against the poor either. And so again, somebody like Donald Trump can come in and say, I'm going to bring manufacturing back. I'm going to make things the way they were back when the Democrats used to actually run the government. And the Democrats have to argue against their own ideas from back when they ran the government. Also, the decline of labor unions, which again, you get Ronald Reagan starting in the 1980s. Then Bill Clinton in the 90s with NAFTA and permanent trade relations with China further decimated union labor in this country. By 2019, the share of taxable income earned by the bottom 90% had fallen to 47%, a dramatic decline from the 67% in 1975. This shift reflects the growing economic power of corporations and the wealthy. Of course it does. And then Obama came in and bailed out Wall Street instead of Main Street. That 2008 may have been the last time that we had a real chance to actually reverse any of this crap. But, you know, Obama filled his cabinet with Wall Street people, Robert Rubin, Larry Summers, Timothy Geithner, all these Wall Street advisors, Wall Street cabinet people, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, all these people who themselves are owned by Wall Street. And here we are. You end up with Donald Trump. And just last week, the House Republican members passed a budget resolution paving the way for additional tax breaks while proposing deep cuts to Medicaid, housing assistance, and food programs. So you're screwed either way. This is why you don't allow them to trap you in a two-party system, folks. A two-party duopoly, should I say. We don't have a two-party system. We have a two-party duopoly. This is why you don't let them trap you into that two-party duopoly. Because they can both do this to you. This is why I vote third party. every time, every 4 years. This is exactly why I do that. Now, how can we fix this? I got the few minutes before I got to get out of here. How do we fix this? We need people in office who will raise the federal minimum wage, which I just told you should be about $25 if it had kept pace with what it was supposed to be from the 1960s. We need a wealth tax on billionaires. 70% of Americans support a wealth tax on the billionaire class, and closing the tax loopholes that allow the ultra-rich to avoid paying taxes. And we need labor power. Strengthen labor power and protections. Things like the PRO Act that the Democrats did not fight for when they had the House, the Senate, and Congress. You need actual politicians who will fight for these types of things. You know, it's going to be really hard, but, you know, this is how it goes. This is how it is, you know. You keep sliding into the abyss if you keep voting for these same corrupt individuals. It just is what it is, folks. Oh my God. All right, folks.